But
Exactly.
speaking of food, I want to mention another for me that
Yeah,
was a
tell me
complete
yours.
flop. And again, it was the lesson was more communication ahead of time. I was given the wrong information about the AV setup and the space
Mm.
at this place. And I was a speaker for just about 15 minutes in the middle of a mixer at a bar. And so people were having drinks and then they had to sit down and I had to talk. And so I had a visual presentation to go along with my remarks. But it turns out, and even though I had asked and gotten assurances that this was not the case, it turns out that only the mic or my laptop could go through the sound system at the time,
But not both.
but not both. So I had to just stick with the mic, and most of my PowerPoint was completely useless because I had videos and stuff in there that I was not able to do. So then that made me a little bit nervous. I'm a sweater. So I started sweating because I was like trying to figure out how am I going to rescue this. And here's what did not help the sweating. Where I had to stand for my laptop to even be connected for the parts that you could see
Right.
was about 3 feet away from a tacho bar, a tater tot nacho bar, with all the fixins, including a nacho cheese fountain
Oh
that
my
was
God.
bubbling the entire time, along with the heat lamps to keep the tater tots warm. And it was right next to me, and it was absolutely miserable. And I think the only thing anybody took away from that was watching me sweat because it was pretty awful.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry to laugh so much, but that is a pretty funny story, and I feel like that's a scene from like from Parks and Rec or something. Like not only they told you the AV would work, it didn't. Only one thing would work, and the fact that your PowerPoint couldn't be shown goes back to an earlier episode. That's also why you shouldn't write your text on your slides and hope to rely on that, because what if you don't get the tech? But
Yeah.
okay, so AV didn't work. You only got one thing. Then they stick you next to the tacho bar with a dripping nacho cheese fountain. I mean, that is just right out of a sitcom.
Yeah.
And I thought the fail was when you started the story, you said that, they had the mixer, they got their cocktails, the happy hour, and then they had to go sit down and listen to you talk. So I'm thinking they're probably like, oh, I guess we have to go sit down and listen to this guy talk now. So they might not have been
Yeah. Yeah,
receptive.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, that would be a recommendation that I would have to the organizers of that. I did meet some nice people there, so that is helpful. And eventually, I was able to get away from the nacho cheese fountain and cool myself off. So
Yeah, I think another, if we look at both of our stories, a big takeaway is be aware when there's food. And I remember telling my story to someone else, and they're like, "Mary, you are not going to compete with the strawberry salad."
you're not, yeah. My when I used to work for the congressman, he would often say, one thing I've learned is not to talk for long whenever people are about to eat or graduate. And so I think that definitely the food thing is an issue.
I love that. I think we're going to make a PDF of that or a JPEG of that and put it on our website and our YouTube channel. All right, I've got one more to share with you, and then we
Yeah.
can
Great.
wrap up here for the day. Something now, things are very different with the advent of smartphones, and I know people are, checking their email or whatever on these. But back in the day, when phones weren't smart, they were an interruption because all they did was ring and take calls. And again, this was more than 20 years ago. Early in my career, time management training. Apparently, I learned a lot in that time management job. That's where I had all my fails. Um, I was giving a talk to an electric utility provider in New Jersey and New York, and they had their entire staff. It was like 100 people in what was basically like a mini auditorium, and I was on a stage. And back in the day, before we had smartphones, I would tell people, please turn off your phones or put them on vibrate or silent. I promise I will give you a break to check this is an hour-long talk. We have a lot to cover. I don't want any interruptions. And again, I was in New York, I live in Chicago. And this was also back in the day where I know this because I used to work for a cell phone company. Uh, if you're traveling and the roaming signal can't find you, it will take longer to find your voicemail. So my phone was in my bag. I forgot to turn it off. It was under the podium. And I'm giving my lecture, talking about time management, blah, blah, blah. And then you hear, And I'm like, oh shit. And I know it's mine, but I'm on stage and there's 100 people out there. I'm like, maybe they'll think it's one of them and it's going to stop in three rings anyway. It'll find my voicemail. I'll be fine. So I just keep going, and blah, 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 and blah, 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 and I keep, so I kept talking. Well, after it rang for the 11th time, because I'm thinking, I can't tell them I left my cell phone on because I was just lecturing them on how they can't have theirs turned on. And I told them I don't want any interruptions. So after about and I'm not kidding, it was 11 because I'm sitting there each time it rings going, why isn't it finding my voicemail? It's because I was out of town and the system couldn't find me and blah, 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 blah. So it's ringing, ringing, ringing. And after about the 11th ring, I went, hey, everyone, I wonder if that's my phone. Give me just a second. So sure enough, I go under the podium. It's still ringing and I turn the damn thing off. But that's when I learned and actually, I think that was the day when I finally kind of backed off and went, okay, I'm going to be a little more chill about cell phones. I understand people need to keep in touch with the real world or if their boss wants to get a hold of them. So that's when I dropped that from my lectures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all right. That makes sense to be a little looser on it, as annoying as it can be, because you're right. Even if somebody else's phone buzzes on silent, and even if they have the willpower not to check it, somebody 4 seats over may hear it and have that reaction to check their phone.
Right.
So it is important in something big, and I just wish you had learned that yourself.
Yeah, me too. Well, I learned by experience. So,
Yeah, exactly.
so that was my other fail. And I think what else I took away that day was, own it. If you fuck up in the classroom or giving a speech, own it. There's nothing wrong with saying, oops, my bad. So,
right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I hope our experiences here are useful for our listeners and viewers. And I hope those of you watching today, I hope you know not to do what Randy and I did. And I hope you learn to ask some questions. What do you want our viewers to take away, Randy?
I would love if people share with us their experiences, their great and not so great experiences presenting to people, because it can be fun to tell, as embarrassing as some of them feel.
I would love that too. Well, thanks for joining us today on Between Two Speakers. I'm Mariana Swallow.
And I'm Randy Ford. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.